Scott, you want to lead us off?
Yeah, I would just want to welcome everybody. My name's Scott Meza. I'm a shareholder in this firm, Greenberg Tribe, large international firm, but really work in the middle market, work with a lot of local companies who have had some great years the last few years. And the question is, what do the next couple of years hold? Can you guys hear me okay? Generally, I don't need a mic, I'm told. But I welcome you here, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from our panelists who actually run companies and are going to have views on that. So thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me, Lori.
Well, first, Scott, I want to thank you for having us here, and thank you for your support, your team's support, and that of Greenberg Traurig. Welcome, everyone. I'm Lori Wiggins, CEO of Byond. Welcome to our panel discussion tonight, Growing Your Business During Uncertain Times. Byond is a business growth company, and we help executives of software and technology companies grow their revenues as well as their bottom line. I'd like to introduce my business partner, Hector Del Castillo. Hector, raise your hand. And he's going to have the mic, the roaming mic tonight. Before we get started, there's a few housekeeping rules. First, we are recording this session, so if you're not asking a question, please remain silent. Having said that, we want questions from the audience and comments during the panel discussion. You don't have to wait till afterwards for a Q&A session. So this is intended to be interactive. And if you want to ask a question or make a comment, please just raise your hand and I'll call on you. And everyone here will get a link to the recording of this session tonight, so you can re-listen to it if you hear something particularly interesting or pass it along to others. Now, I'd like for the panel to please introduce themselves briefly, and Len, let's start with you.
Sure thing. Thank you. And everybody hear me okay, I hope. I tend to speak softly even though I'm a big guy, because I'm always afraid I'm going to blow people out of the water. So I'm Lynn Meller, the CEO of Heinz. I newly minted CEO. I just took over the company position as CEO at the end of August. So just about to have our end of our first quarter together as a leadership team. So we're excited about it. Heinz is, we've been in business since technically 2004. We support government contractors, state and local contractors, and winning business with their constituents and stakeholders. And we do a little bit of commercial work as well.
Thank you.
My name's Shai Palavani. I'm a local entrepreneur here in the DC area. My first company was a company called LiveSafe. It was an incident reporting mobile app. We were blessed to be able to exit that business last year. That business had 4 billionaire investors, founder of AOL, Fred Smith, the founder of FedEx, Hearst, and Dave Duffield. So it was pretty awesome to learn from those guys. And then our new business is Hungry. We've been doing it for the last 7-8 years. And it's an office catering marketplace. Chefs cook on our platform and we deliver it for office catering. We're grateful to have about a dozen celebrity investors. We have the rapper Jay-Z, we've got the comedian Kevin Hart, we have the singer Usher, and a bunch of other cool names to make our office catering company a little bit more fun.
Thank you.
And hi everyone, I'm Andres Peters. I work with Maestro Group, and we are a sales accelerator based out of the DC area. And what I do there is I help people do their jobs better and be more artisan-like in their approach to sales. And what I mean by that is I do training, coaching, and consulting organizations as they build and as they scale up their sales organizations using industrial and organizational psychology and behavioral science throughout all of the work that we do. So I'm really excited to be here with you all today and talk a little bit about some of the things that we're seeing as a company as well.
Thank you, everyone. So we're going to get started, and I have the first question. And this is, how do you define growth for your company? And how did you achieve your business growth? How has your company grown over the last 3 years? And we're talking about 2020, 2021, and 2022. Whoever wants to start off.
I'm happy to jump in quickly here to start us off. So, often we work with CEOs, or I'll work with CEOs, and we ask them the same question is, how do you define growth? And it's really trying to understand really what is your strategy aiming towards? Are you looking to grow your top line revenue? Are you looking to increase profits? Are you looking to generate cash? Or are you looking to generate new logos? And what does that growth tell your investors? What does that growth tell your employees? And how are you strategizing or articulating that strategy to your employee base? For us, right now, our focus is on top line revenue. And so we are looking at different ways in which we can differentiate ourselves, not only in the market, but also our offerings so that we can generate more sales quickly within our teams and then move on to the next client. So that's kind of how we look at it ourselves.
Sure, I'll go next. We do look at profit because we're in the business to make money, but we also look at the number of clients and the types of clients that we're trying to help grow, because that's what we're in the business for, is to help our clients grow as well as, and we grow because of that. So we're always looking at that mix of small, mid-tier, and large businesses that we work with regularly. But we also are focused on the number of employees that we're hiring as a ratio to the number of 1099s that we work with, because that makes a big difference to our top line and our profit line as well.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, at Hungary we measure growth, top line revenue and profit. Getting to profitability is super important. We also want to launch in as many cities as possible. I believe we're in about a dozen cities in the U.S. now, so we want to get to every city in the U.S. We want to serve as many people as possible with our catering, so these are all metrics that we monitor. During COVID, we're in the office catering business. Our business basically went to zero. If no one's in the office, no one's there to order food. So it was probably the worst business to be in, more so than the restaurant business where you can have takeout in a certain capacity. So we basically try to stay positive, and we innovated. We did last mile delivery. We did virtual events just to keep the revenue going during COVID, not have to shut down. And thankfully, both those businesses are bigger than our prior business. And now that people are returning to the office, we have 3 business lines that are helping accelerate our growth. So going from zero and having the worst business to be in, now we're growing pretty fast, and we can say we're one of the fastest growing companies. Because when you start with zero,
It's a good place to
So,
You can only go up, right?
You could go down, right?
Yeah, you could go maybe true negative. And I would say, I'll just speak from the corporate lawyer's point of view. I do a lot of M&A selling companies. So when we think about growth over the last 3 years, we've sold a lot of companies. If you put them in 2 categories, there's one group of companies, we'll call them government contractors typically, where earnings is critical. Your value is a multiple, basically, that the market understands of your adjusted EBITDA. So growing earnings, but we're also selling technology companies, selling a company now, we just got tonight, $300 million offer through an auction process. That's a company with very few sales, but they have a credible technology, so their growth was in commercializing their technology, and they have a few reference customers, not a lot of revenue, but customers that say this technology works. And so for me, that's, when I think about clients, it's earnings growth, and for the tech companies, it's workable technology that has commercial acceptance. Mm-hmm. Whether it's profitable or not, it matters, but it's not necessarily a determination for exit.
And Scott, I actually have a question for you, a follow-on on that. So how important for you is it to look at founder-led sales versus, organizations that have actual sales teams that are able to duplicate
question.
that sales process
Yeah.
in terms of when you're evaluating a company.
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, think of it from a buyer's perspective. Buyers generally expect, I'm buying your company, you're the founder, I'm going to give you a lot of money, and you're going to be disincentivized, and you're going to go away. How good is the sales team that you've got, and can I keep them, and will they continue to produce?
Mhm.
So founder-led is, most of our clients probably are founder-led, but building a really capable sales team that's not just a function of the founder is a positive.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so some of our answers led into the next question. Thank you very much. And that is, did you have to pivot your business during the pandemic? And if so, how? And Shai, I'll just go right back to you because you touched on that so clearly.
Sure, and I'll be short because I ruined the second question. But that's all I can think about.
You depressed us, Shai.
Since COVID, I'm depressed, high anxiety, and I'm just worried. So all I can think about is how we had to pivot. I think most normal people would probably quit when we hit that wall. We probably should have given our investors their money back and said, hey, this business no longer works. But we just stayed super positive. We innovated. There's a lot of things that didn't work. I mentioned the two that did. There's a lot of things that we tried that didn't. But it was super important to be flexible and pivot.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting when the pandemic hit because Heinz is a completely remote-based company. We don't have real estate to deal with. So we didn't have to worry about giving up office space. It was interesting watching our clients try to make that pivot, though, as they tried to learn how to do meetings on Zoom or Teams or whatever. So we ended up pivoting our business to kind of help our clients coalesce a little bit and run their teams using the different software that were out there, because we had people that were working with them on different projects. So those people knew how to run meetings that way already because we were already doing it with some of our other clients. So that's how we kind of pivoted. It was kind of interesting, still interesting with some clients too.
And then for our business, we were always remote to begin with, but our primary source of income came from doing all-day trainings with folks. And as you know, no one wants to sit in front of a Zoom computer all day. So we worked to modularize all of our trainings from 2 8-hour days into 10 2-hour courses. And what it allowed us to do is actually start offering things a la carte. So people who just needed part of our training package would be able to buy one course versus having to invest in a full 2 days. And then it also opened us up to allow us to be more integrated with an organization because it required more upfront conversations. So we were able to actually provide our expertise early on, and that led to follow-on work after we would deliver, that one training or that 2 trainings to them.
And so, Laura, what I would say, as a lawyer, a corporate lawyer, you become a butterfly collector. You have clients and you see those that succeed and fail. And more than anything, what makes companies successful is leadership. And I define leadership as people that can pivot in hard times to do something different. Most of the successful companies I represented, they're different than what they started out to be. And so all of you, commend you to be able to figure out a creative way to manage what is truly unanticipated catastrophe, right? Nobody had a pandemic in their business model. So that's what good leadership, good business management's about.
I have a question.
Please go ahead.
Thanks. Ross, Lincoln House. So I want to touch on the last 2 questions. One was kind of pre and post pandemic, and then the other was related to sales. And it seems like all of you are involved, and there's some service component to what you're doing, right? It's consulting, or you're having to engage someone for an office catering. So you're making a sell to an individual. I'm curious to know how the kind of sales process pre-pandemic to where we are now has changed in terms of getting that sale done, over the phone or virtually versus in person. I've certainly seen a change in our business where pre-pandemic, it was almost guaranteed you were going to have several meetings that were going to need to be in person. There was going to be some wining and dining aspect of it involved. Whereas now, you're almost shocked that it's like the same customer you'd be targeting pre-pandemic that would require fairly high customer acquisition costs with a lot of personal interaction can now be done literally over Zoom. one, are you seeing the same thing? Two, do you think it's going to continue that way? And three, do you think that folks that get too comfortable with the idea of only selling through kind of a virtual environment are missing out? And is that kind of human-to-human interaction as a company in this environment going to give you a leg up over everyone else, since they think that's the norm but may not be capitalizing on that personal interaction?
I'll take that, because it impacts us big time. Before, and I started off with the company as an account lead 6 years ago, so that's all I did was sales, plus on-site consulting with my clients once they engaged. The pre-pandemic, it was definitely in person, big time, with lots of follow-up. The old rule of booking a meeting from a meeting was constantly ongoing. So average 3 to 5 meetings before we closed a sale. And then learning how to do something slightly different post-pandemic or during pandemic was interesting at best. Because a lot of the clients didn't know how to handle that anymore either, because they weren't used to engaging with a screen as opposed to someone sitting across the table from them. And so it took a while before we started seeing that turn a bit and people becoming more willing to open up a bit. But recently, we've seen some of our clients go back to more in-person meetings, but they're even in more of a hybrid mode. We may have the final closing meeting in person, but everything else prior to that, including the opening of getting a client even interested, has all been done online through emails, phone calls, you name it. So it's good. I think it's going to be a hybrid for the future. And so that's a challenge from a salesperson's perspective. If you didn't grow up in this industry and understanding how to make that kind of a pivot, and you have to go back to the way it used to be, that's going to be hard on people. So I think the sales training that's out there has got to take this into account if it's not already doing that.
I was just going to add to that. Yeah, and that's the challenge that we see with all the organizations that we work with. And really what it is, it's, before the pandemic, it would take 8 to 10 touches, meaning whether you called them, whether you sent them an email, sent them a LinkedIn invite, whatever, just to get someone to respond, whether that was yes or stop bothering me. Since the pandemic hit, it's been now 14 to 16. So almost double. And then also, Forrester did some research in terms of the number of individuals that are involved in making a decision. And most buying centers went from going from 6 to 8 people to 8 to 12. So now you've got more people involved, and you've got a longer runway that you have to deal with. So the numbers are already stacked up against you. So the first thing I would look at if I were looking at your CRM or looking at the tools that your sales team uses is, one, how many touches are they doing for each prospect that they're reaching out to, and then also how long has it been? Because if it takes 14 to 16 and they're reaching out to them every 2 days, it's going to take you almost 28 days to get someone just to even respond back to you or put them in a different sequence for them.
Thank you. Did you get your question answered?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, one follow-up question. So from a sales training, you want to use this for? Okay.
Please.
From a sales training perspective, and Lynn hit on this, have you seen folks start to offer sales training for individuals that are trying to make that transition where you've got this kind of hybrid selling? And I'm talking specifically for services, because you're selling a product versus a service, right? It's product off the shelf versus selling gray matter, or selling consulting. Are you aware of kind of successful training programs for sales teams that help them kind of bridge that divide of where, hey, it's this kind of hybrid model, and you've seen a 50% increase in touches that have to be made to convert somebody from a sales perspective? Is there a model out there that's worked? Is it your company's? What's kind of the new frontier here in terms of training teams to deal with this kind of post-pandemic environment to sell services specifically?
Yeah, and I'm happy to answer that question. And so I always look at, whenever we're engaging with a new organization, I always look at 2 things. Are your people capable, and are they willing? So meaning, are they capable to do the job, and are they willing or motivated enough to do it? And those are 2 questions that are way beyond training. Training will only solve a symptom of a larger problem. So if, for example, your processes aren't set up in a way where you're able to track and coach people to do the right things, or if your process, you don't have a strong enough process, sales process or sales motion that's repeatable, or even if your compensation plan is too convoluted and hard for them to get, those are all detractors from getting them to actually do their job, which is selling. Because they're going to do the activities that are going to get them paid the fastest. And if part of that is, not having good CRM hygiene, not contacting prospects, on a daily basis, or just having very disparate processes, meaning you're not following a methodology. We always say, follow our methodology, follow any other methodology. They're all good. The difference is the companies that are able to actually implement them and hold people accountable to them are the ones that see the success. So if you don't have that infrastructure in place, training's not going to solve the problem.
Yeah, quick follow-up on that too. I think regardless of what process you use, it all goes back to developing the initial relationships. And I call it building bridges. If you can't build a bridge with a potential client, and it's hard when it's a cold call, right? You don't know each other. You've got to find something that's in common that you can sync up on. If you can't find that, I don't know how you're ever going to close a sale. You're not going to get the opportunity to actually close the sale, right? So, new salespeople have got to learn to do that. And I think it's harder now than it used to be when you could sit down and do networking events, right? So like this year has been great for us in terms of the networking. We're back on. I've been to 4 major conferences this year. One of them was in Poland, of all places, which was one of the best conferences I've ever been to. Because it had to deal with the potential building for rebuilding of Ukraine. We made all kinds of hot contacts there. So stuff is starting to happen now because of that, because of the cycle coming out. Once you've made that initial contact, how many follow-ups do you have to do? And you got to kind of keep on them without telling them to tell you to go pound sand. So, but teaching people how to do it over Zoom calls is a little bit different. So,
Thank you. Great discussion. Our next question is, what mindset did you adopt to deal with adverse circumstances, whether it was pivoting or things you were trying and they weren't working during the pandemic? Anybody?
I've had a couple examples, and I wasn't the CEO at the time, right? But I was part of the second tier of the leadership team. And our first reaction was we kind of started to hunker down first to make sure we protected our core business, because we didn't want our clients to go away. So we did that pretty rapidly. At the same time, we started looking at some other offerings that we had kind of like on the back burner, but we didn't roll them out. We didn't even plan them yet. So during the pandemic, the height of it, we actually rolled out 3 solution service offerings that we've come up with. One's about our training business. Another one's on how we help companies do pricing and provide competitive intelligence. And then we actually focused on building a small business offering, which is a unique thing in our business. No one else has been doing that. And it's tied to some software that we provide to them. They can get on one of our websites, and they want to build a compliance matrix, for example, for their proposal. The proposal manager from them can get on there, they scan their company card, and off they go. And it's affordable for small businesses. So we've targeted that set. That was one of the ways we pivoted.
So you were actually developing new offerings.
Yeah.
Very good.
And that's led to us expanding all 3 of those this next year.
Anyone else?
So regardless of the pandemic well, I guess not regardless of the pandemic, but for us, we have 2 pillars that we always infuse into anything that we talk about as an organization. Our 2 pillars are control what you can control and mitigate risk. And so whether it's a pandemic, whether it's a deal that's gone awry, we're always looking at what are the things that we could have controlled in that situation that we didn't control for, and what were the risks that we either saw or didn't realize were there that could help us in the future. And what that's helped us do is, one, also decouple uncouple all of our trainings into those modules, but then make a realization that not everyone can devote 2 hours to training when they need to hit their numbers. So we've now pivoted into creating self-paced training. We talk with a lot of CEOs that ask us very, I don't want to say basic, but very core questions that need to be answered before you start creating a sales organization. So right now I'm in the effort of creating a sales academy for CEOs that are do founder-led sales and want to transition what their knowledge base is to a sales team in a very formalized, deliberate way versus hiring in someone who talks a good talk, but takes them 6 months to even get their first meeting. So you don't have to make that bad hire early on.
And I would just say what we did is to say our clients are under stress. So number one, we're going to learn everything we can about PPP loans, whatever the government support is. We know your employees are under stress. We're going to try to develop a body of knowledge about how to manage employees in this environment, and we're going to give it away. So we're not going to. We want you to take our information and learn from it, because our assumption is we're going to come out of COVID, and you're going to remember you guys were there supporting us, giving us information that wasn't easily accessible, and weren't trying to make a living out of it. And so we're going to hire you for our sale or our financing. So a small pivot, but from my business, that was what we decided to do.
I'll just add, how we dealt with adversity is just kind of a mindset. Part of our core values is, we have 7 or 8 core values that we hire on. That's part of our culture. One of them is positivity. So I mentioned it before. You just have to be super positive. You deal with so many problems and issues. If you let it get you down, you're done. You're dead. And then you also have to have a problem-solving mindset. I think that's what gets us to innovate and come up with good ideas in times of need. But if you get to that problem and you're negative, you're dead. But if you're waking up each morning saying, I'm looking forward to those problems to solve because that's my job. I'm the leader in the company or I'm the head of sales. I'm supposed to be the problem solver. So again, attacking each day with that sense of urgency, that positivity, that, hey, I know there's going to be challenges today in the world we're living in today, and I'm ready to help try to solve those. So it's just really important to have that kind of mentality.
I appreciate the positive mental attitude. I think that's really critical, whether you're facing business issues or personnel issues or social issues. And that almost pretty much answers our next question about the approach that you take to deal with failures and mistakes. But maybe there's some other things that you did too, some other techniques that someone would like to expand on that.
Yeah. Another idea is, trying to fail fast. I think something that we talked about. I'm head of tech at Hungary, so we don't spend forever building something and testing something forever and then making sure it's right and then pushing it live. I have I tell them adjust in flight. Work on it as fast as possible, get it live, so that we're just working as fast as possible, and then you just keep tweaking. But if something doesn't work, you put it to bed and you move on to the next one. When COVID happened, we started doing delivery from the Nats stadium to people at their home for game day. That's not going to last when people come back to the stadium, so that was a bad idea. But it kept us busy. So there's a bunch of ideas that didn't work, but again, we just kept trying to go at it.
I was just going to add to that. I think, Shai, you hit on a really important point, was what are our core values, or what is our mission, what's our purpose? And I think, what a lot of leaders tend to forget is when a problem happens, they forget about, well, why do we do what we do? And so when that happens, then that becomes the blame game. Then that becomes every challenge or every problem is the biggest problem we need to solve for the day. And then people get burnt out by that. And so I always challenge leaders or other CEOs to always think about, okay, well, how would you solve this if you were to look at your core values, right? And how does your response align or not align with those core values? Because your employees are seeing your reaction, and if they see a difference between your reaction versus what you espouse or what you put out into the market, then they're not going to feel that psychological safety of being able to fail fast if they feel like someone is not going to help bring them back up. If you say that we have a supportive environment, but the last person that failed, you fired them.
Thank you. I'm sorry, did you want to add something? Please.
I'm a big believer in experimentation, fail fast, but learn from it fast. You can only go so far. And we had a major failure during the pandemic. We actually thought it was time to roll out a full integrated ERP system. And we planned for it and didn't realize we were sold a bill of goods until we got about a month into it. And it was like the mobile platform that they had advertised just wasn't going to work for us. And it wasn't mature enough for us. So fortunately, we weren't that far into it that we couldn't just cut it off and stop the bleeding. It's still a fun subject to bring up to my CFO, because she was involved in that one at the time, because she was hoping to benefit from it, obviously. But we'll do it again one day when we're ready. But the pivot we made was we had a homegrown system that we're been able to continue to add to and do some automations to it and process improvements that have let us get what we really need for the next maybe year or so, and as we prepare for the next phase.
I really appreciate your sharing that, because it can be difficult for people to share their failures because they think that somehow they are diminished in the eyes of others. Yet, to do so is so helpful to everyone. And so I thank you for that. Our next question has to do with, did the way that you recruit, retain, and compensate employees change during the pandemic? And what is your current position on working remotely?
We had to pay people more, inflation. Everyone looked at Amazon salaries. They go on Glassdoor and put in, I'm a front-end developer, and based on, salaries in the area, you get an average. So that definitely went up. We definitely had to bump people up, which was expensive, but I think everyone had to do that. And the number one perk right now for us is not just food in the office, is can you work from home? So I think it's part of the package now that the company is flexible on the person being able to work remote. Even if they want to do it or not, just hearing that is super important for the employee. And if you say, no, I need you in the office, then they're going to go look for another job. I think it's sad that we're all at home and sales are going to be done virtually, but it can be done virtually, and it will be a hybrid model, like Len said. That's the perk now, to work from home and have a more work-life balance, be able to walk my dog in the morning, pick up my kids from school. That beats driving into the office and having to, people want to work on their own times now. So it's unfortunate, but I think that's part of the game now. So all of our team is working remote. We come in Thursdays to have lunch together and have meetings. We're trying to convince our team to come in more than one day a week, but that's definitely not part of our recruiting strategy. We tell everyone they can work remote, and that's part of the incentive.
Yeah, spot on, because we do the same thing. We work remote, completely remote, unless the client needs us on their site. And that's actually rare these days, unless it's a classified opportunity where you've got to be in that space, wherever it might be. The one thing that we did initially that I remember when the pandemic hit is we put a stop on any hiring of full-time people until we needed that individual. And that had to go through a special leadership approval process. But we did make some hires during the pandemic, probably about a year into it, is the way it happened. But the outcome of the pandemic was we had so many people that wanted to go into consulting that it gave us a new basis of 1099 independent consultants that were coming into the market. So that helped us in a lot of ways. So I think that's, we benefited from that. But now everybody wants to work remote, just about everybody.
For us, I think, as you all may be aware, sales is a pretty hot market. The salaries are pretty inflated in sales right now. And so the challenge for us has been not only matching or getting the best candidates, but then also how do we evaluate them to make sure that we're making the best investment. Because for some of that, for us, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially. And so what we instituted, or what we have instituted, is, we have a 5-part recruiting process. And part of it is to, one, test their acumen as a professional. Like, are they able to write a simple email? Are they able to articulate a value prop over the phone? Down to even doing a math test, where they'll tell us, we'll look at their resume, and they'll give us whatever their quota was, whatever their percentage to quota was. And then we just kind of talk to them in our interview and ask them, well, what did you hit last year? And then giving them the number, do some quick math on a Excel spreadsheet to see, are they lying to me? Especially with sales right now, people are moving jobs pretty quickly, so it's hard to tell if what they're telling you is because they're looking to not get caught by the current company and get fired, or do they really have the skill set to work at your company? So that's part of what we've done. And then the other piece, to Len's point, is using contingent workforce, right? Bringing in 1099 so that we can expand and contract as needed depending on how many clients we're servicing. So we have more 1099s than we have core employees, but we bring them back for different projects with depending on what the skill set is we need. And then the last thing about remote, and then I'll be done here. A lot of organizations are shifting to a designing your day mentality, where it's like, depending on how you work best and what's needed of you that day, it's whether you work from home, client site, or in the office. And using that type of language versus you're all full remote or all full in person gives that agency back to that individual to make those decisions, if your business allows that.
And the legal profession is, I think, a lot different. It's a hierarchical business, but it's a business that really requires hands-on collaborative work in a regulated environment. And I think we reached a conclusion that you cannot be a young lawyer and mature and become a great lawyer, someone who understands how to serve clients, how to listen to clients, and how to do the complex job of advising clients, if you've done it 100% remotely. I think the judgment is you will not be able to model good and bad behavior in that fashion in this unusual business. Law business is very different. So what we've said is, please come in 3 days a week. Our staff is here. You can see them here working. It's not fair that they're here and you are not. And we have lost associates. I had a wonderful woman candidate I was recruiting. She was fabulous. She said, I love to come. I will not leave South Carolina. And I said, well, then we can't hire you. Because I do not believe my business can be a business that provides the client service you need being 100% remote. Mm-hmm. I just don't think it works. But I totally understand what you guys, and I think, Lynn, you were telling me something. You guys do things to get people in the office for special.
Yeah,
maybe
we do.
Talk about that.
We do. We have quarterly all hands meetings as the biggest meetings that we have. Two of those a year are in a rental space that we keep aside for large events like that. And then our leadership team meets every other month in person. The 4 of us get together. And the employees, though, we bring them together for special events like that as often as we can, as often as they will tolerate it. Now, not everybody's local either, though. We have people that are out in Texas. We've had one in California, a couple down in Florida. So now they're getting flown in for the holiday party. So.
Nice.
Yeah, I have to say one legal thing. What we've been all, as lawyers, been learning now, the states are looking at ways to increase revenue based on remote working. Mm-hmm. So if your people have a physical presence in Illinois, the tax code would suggest that some of your income is allocated to Illinois and you pay Illinois corporate tax. No one knows how to figure that out right now. Because if everybody's remote, my whole tax model explodes. Yep. So this is why lawyers benefit during times of challenge. But it's something to think about. There is a tax cost ultimately you're going to experience from remote working.
And when we were talking earlier, I was mentioning to Len about the concept of the on-site is the new off-site. So if you aren't a fully, if you are a hybrid workplace, just making sure if you're bringing people together that it's for deliberate reasons or, for that culture building. I mean, I started my career at Deloitte, and very much the same thing where you got the energy from other people that you wouldn't get if you were fully remote, and you just felt that energy in the office. So I totally understand needing to be in the office as well. And then the other piece about remote work is, as you're thinking about hiring, across the country, if you are doing remote, considering cost of living is something that folks don't tend to think enough of. And so, $100,000 here in the DC area is very different than $100,000 in Nebraska, right? And so if someone's motivated doing a job and you're paying them way above their cost of living, they may not work as hard, right, as someone who is, in this area or struggling in this area.
Interesting.
There's two questions.
Yes, please go ahead.
So I know two of your companies were remote before the pandemic, but have you noticed any changes or correlation between productivity for your sales teams and being either a structure that's hybrid, fully remote, or fully in the office?
Ours having been fully remote all the time, but before the pandemic, we were always out with our clients. I think our productivity stayed about the same level from what I recall looking backwards. It's ramping up heavily now, though. Because we adopted the mentality of going into the new year by finishing strong in the fourth quarter to roll strong into 2023. And so, we're pushing hard on that. So the sales, we had a very senior sales guy that was out with a serious medical condition for a while, so that kind of hurt him a little bit. But bam, he's cancer-free now and off and running hard again. So we're happy to see that him back. So that's my observation.
I think productivity has stayed the same or increased. That's why people are getting away with working from home. But it goes back to what everyone was saying about building that culture, being together, being super important. For a startup, I can't imagine starting a company all virtual. Even though both my businesses are tech companies, you have to sit around a table and see that person hustling hard and feel that energy and want to reciprocate and work harder than that person. Or there's communication that happens and ideas that happen when you're just sitting around a table working together. So I can't see how to start a business virtually. Now I'm sure it happens. It's just very hard to build that culture and that urgency, the ability to attack each day with a sense of urgency. But productivity's up. That's why people are getting away with working from home. They're not working the same hours, but they might be working more hours, right? Once I put my kids to sleep, or once I do everything I wanted to do during the day, now I'm working on that project and I get it done.
Was there a question in the back of the room? Yes.
I think Shai did hit the point, but I'm a startup guy and I believe in on-site, right? And the culture building and everything, what Shai just said. With all that, obviously I have to adapt to the new COVID rules and all those things, and I've been adapting to that, but I'm also seeing the challenges with moonlighting, right? There are a lot of people who have been doing moonlighting across, working multiple jobs or doing consulting. How do you guys, have you guys come across that, or have you guys addressed that, or how do you check that?
That's a big problem that I don't think people are talking about enough. Everybody's doing it, right? Quiet quitting, they call it as well. I'm not working as hard as before, right? When I'm sitting in the office and I got my managers around me, I'm working my tail off. I want to make a good impression. If I'm at home, I'm watching the sports game. I'm watching FIFA World Cup. That's quiet quitting. It's dishonest. You're getting paid from the company to work during that time. So it's very dishonest. I think companies should talk about it more with their employees about integrity. And if you have another job, you have another hustle, just let us know. Tell us what your new hours are, right? That transparency is super important. Everyone's doing it. The developer, if I was a developer, I'd have 2 jobs. I'm not a developer. I'm not that smart. But I'd code all day for my day job till 5 p.m., then I'd code for my hustle job till midnight. So maybe it is breeding more hustlers, But it is a big issue. It's a big issue, the quiet quitting, and that's a very good question.
I was just going to add there. I think the other piece to understand is like what is the leadership culture like? So who's overseeing that person? That will let you understand whether or not someone does have a side hustle. Like if their productivity is going down, then obviously that side hustle is taking away from what they're being paid core to do. And so how are your midline managers addressing that and becoming aware of that? How have you set the expectations or the performance expectations of that individual in a way that you're able to at least have the conversation to say, we're not seeing the productivity that we expected to see from you. Why is that happening? Or what's causing that?
I think it's more of a question of, they can have more productivity rather than, they're not meeting their expectations, right? It's about above and beyond, and I think that's where we're seeing the challenges. And I've seen, I think people can contribute more, but they do not because they have a side hustle, and I think that's where I'm seeing challenges. But again, I'm just, that's the challenge I'm facing rather than being unproductive.
Yeah. So I have a very visceral reaction when I hear the term quiet quitting, because I feel like organizations use quiet quitting as an excuse for bad job design. And so if an employee is doing the job based on the job description that they were given and are meeting expectations, then they're doing their job. If your expectation is that they continue to go above and beyond without any sort of motivation from your end, whether that is through bonuses, whether that is through additional shares, whether that is through additional time off or even recognition, then your expectations of that employee are far beyond their expectations of when they signed on to the organization, if they're not seeing it. So I think before looking at it as being dishonest, if they're performing as you expected them as they signed on to your organization, then it's more looking at, okay, well, how am I compensating them and how am I motivating them, rather than why are they going somewhere else?
I think another kind of theme here is we are working less. We're getting it done, we're being productive, but to your point, we're not going the extra mile. And the reason is because work-life balance is finally happening. This country is the hardest working country. We've always been number one. Hopefully we'll stay number one. But it's because we work so hard. You go to any other country, they're 3 o'clock, they're napping, they're at a cafe. We are the hardest working country, and it's exciting, but it has slowed down, unfortunately. COVID slowed us down. We are not as hustlers as we were before. We're doing what I need to keep my job, and then I'm working on my passion. So I think you nailed it, but we got guys like this that will help us get through it.
Yeah. And I just want to confess to Shai that I've gone home and watched every World Cup match almost, so apologize, buddy.
I did it the other day. I had to watch U.S. and Iran.
Right.
So-
So,
I think
By the
we
way,
have
it is
another
true, we have-
question in the
yeah,
back.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so during the past several years, of course, the market growing dramatically and the company have a hard time to fill their job slots. And that's why the salaries increase and the young generations are demanding that work remotely from home. And even COVID's passed, they're still demanding that's the norm. Now with recent economic turnaround and with Amazon layoff and Twitter layoff, do you see that the trend will reverse, that the company will demand people, young generations, go back to work and go back to the office, or the trend will continue?
I think the trend will change. I heard something profound that someone said it's going to be generational. It might take 10 years, right? Everyone loves working from home now, and then we start seeing all the problems that come about. There might be some generation that graduates that says, I've had enough. I want to be out there in the workforce. But I think it's going to take a lot of time for that to happen. And it's, it's just the way it's going to be. People are going to want to work from home and be remote. But one thing I was going to say is the people that switched jobs during COVID, they're very nervous, right? So someone like Amazon and Netflix and whoever else is laying off people, who do you think they're laying off? They're laying off the people they just hired, the people who have the least amount of history there, the people who have accomplished the least amount of things at that company. So all those people that thought they were real slick by getting their remote jobs are super nervous now because they might be the first one to get let go as the recession keeps continuing through next year. So I think you're right, there might be a kind of a reaction where it comes back around where some people get forced back into the office because they don't want to lose their jobs.
Did you want to say?
I was gonna say, I had a client, a wise client told me, you've got to stop thinking in short time frames. He says, go back 100 years, more than 100 years, before there was a telephone, before there was email. You could only do business face to face. There was no other alternative. So that changed radically when you had a telephone, and then you had a fax, and then you had email. So it's all been progressing. What COVID did is it accelerated the phenomena. And I think, like Shai's saying, I think it will fall back, but I don't think it'll ever go back to the way it was. And it's just technology continues to change the world as it did 120 years ago. It's doing it today.
I just had one little factoid, right? So right now in the job market, right, you have 5 generations that are currently working right now in the job market. And so, you're starting to see, at least from the boomer generation, the baby boomer generation, that they're starting to retire. So there's going to be a gap that's going to need to be filled. So even though we're starting to see those massive layoffs, or those layoffs now, soon there's going to be people exiting the job market because of retirement. So they'll need to be filled. So I think that's just an important thing to take away, is not to immediately start restricting your employees or put more restrictions in terms of how they do their work because of that factor.
Interesting.
Thank you. How do you plan? One more, excuse me. Please go ahead.
So, one of you guys mentioned the word passion earlier, and I'd like to go back to that because I think, first and foremost, I'm very fanatical about that word. And when I interview people, the first question I ask them is, what are you passionate about? So, if people, in my opinion, will stay in one job, will not do side gigs. If they're passionate about what they're doing, and if you are compensating them appropriately, if you're taking care of them. When COVID started, I was a shareholder in a company that a significant part of the work staff were in India. We had 62 people. It's a startup, small company, 62 people in India. And I owned 30%. I had 2 partners that another one owned 30 and one owned 40%. And right in the middle of COVID, I called one of my best employees in India, and I said, Vishwa, how are things going, and what can we do to make sure everybody survives this? And he said, in India, when COVID hit, public health care became basically non-existent, overwhelmed. And he said, the only people that can see a doctor are people that have private insurance. So if you guys pay for private insurance, that would make everybody happier than everything else, more than anything else. So I asked him, I said, go do some research. He's one of the senior people there. Go do some research and tell me what it costs for us to pay for healthcare. 62 people. The cost to pay just the employees was $8,000 a month. The cost to pay the employees, just the employees and their immediate family, meaning husband, wife, and the children, was $8,000 a month. If you add the grandparents, it was $12,000 a month. I went back to my 2 partners and I said, let's pay the $12,000. That would do us more than anything else. My 2 partners refused to pay for that. I sold my shares on that day. I sold my shares at a loss to my 2 partners. Okay, because they refused to pay that $12,000. So that told me that they didn't care about it. These were my friends. People I've been friends with for over 20 years. And I literally walked away from that business. So that, because that's taking care of the employees. So it's not just good salary. It's doing, whether it's vacations, caring about healthcare, and all of these, that matters. So if you take care of them and they are doing something they enjoy, I think you can forget about moonlight.
Interesting.
I agree.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We did pay $12,000.
You paid?
We did for
Yeah.
150 people.
Yeah.
And we had a retention of 97%. during COVID times.
And you were much smarter than us. So,
Thank you.
It's all about taking care of.
yeah.
How do you plan to continue and accelerate your business growth in the future? Len, let's start with you.
Well, we've created several, I will call them wildly important goals that are kind of scary goals, and they've been communicated throughout the entire organization. We're very transparent with the employees, and it's actually the first company in my entire career that has been so transparent. And they were with me that way before I even joined them. And that's one of the reasons I joined them, because I had many options coming out as my last full-time employer. Tied to that are correspondingly wildly important projects that go along with them. And so those are tying together because the projects are going to influence and help the growth that we want to achieve in those major goals that we've set. So that's one way that we're looking at it.
Thank you. Sean?
Yeah, we're just trying to keep the foot to the pedal, grow as fast as possible. During COVID, we kept hiring. Catering companies were going out of business, so we saw it as an opportunity to pick up all the really good people. And we just kind of invest in the future, and now it's paying off, thankfully. We just want to go to more cities. We're actually in a fundraising round right now that hopefully will close soon, just to enter more cities. We've acquired a couple catering companies. We bought a snack business called Nature Box in California to expand some of our product lines. But it's all about growing that revenue, getting to more cities, and and just investing in new people.
Thank you.
And then our focus is moving or pivoting more so into the self-paced training. So really focusing on bringing down the price point so that more people can opt into it, and that organizations don't have to invest in their people. Someone can invest $50 in themselves, but learn a lot of information they can use on the job. That helps us build our revenues. And then also hiring or bringing in some more strategists to help us move up market. So moving from the startups side up into more mid-market sized organizations.
Scott?
I mean, for my practice, it's international. We have an office in Poland, and it's booming. It's very profitable. So we've been trying to figure out ways to, but investors and operators in Europe, they still love America. It's still a place that you can make money and in a relatively unregulated environment. So we're trying to find ways to really attract more foreign investors, particularly from Eastern Europe, because there's a lot of untapped potential there, but also from the Western European, UK countries. So I just think there's a ton of opportunity there for us, and that's what we've been focused on lately.
Thank you. Last question. If you had one piece of advice for an executive that's looking to grow their company, especially in these uncertain times, what would it be? And Lynn, we'll start off with you again.
This topic is one of my favorite. I don't care whether you're a CEO or you're a new employee in a company, you've got to go back and focus on the basic, and that is, what is your why? Start with what you're about. As a CEO, what's your business about? I think, Andres, you brought that up, if I remember. What's your purpose? If you don't understand that, I don't know how you can grow as an individual or as a company. And I deal with a lot of clients that they actually don't know their why. They've got it backwards. They know what they want to sell and what they want to do. They know how they're going to do it, but they don't know why they're going to do it. And I'm serious. It's surprising. And if you get them to flip that around, it changes the dynamics in their company ultimately. It doesn't happen overnight, but within a couple of months, you can start seeing the changes. So, and I encourage everybody to try. You all have probably heard of Simon Sinek. He has a wonderful TED Talk on that, and I would encourage you to dig into that, and then get to the book, The Infinite Game.
Thank you.
What was the question again? My one piece of advice would be, in this environment, to save money, be frugal, cash is king, As an entrepreneur, startups, we always bootstrap, right? We didn't have money to start with, so you're, trying to get things done for free or for super cheap and not paying anyone market rate. You first start off, everyone's working just on equity until you can get some money. But this environment's kind of scary. The Russia-Ukraine thing doesn't look like it has any kind of end to it. And any two countries could just pop off like that, right? That's just Russia and Ukraine that happened over our recent time here. But that could, next up could be Iran, or next up could be I'm Iranian, so that's why I mentioned Iran. It's be conservative with cash. It's very easy to hire a lot of people. It's very easy to spend on conferences or marketing. But if you've raised money or if you have revenue, you want to hold that close and dear, because you want to be able to get through tough times. And it looks like 2023 is going to be a tough time because inflation doesn't go back right away, and the geopolitical stuff is still happening, and oil is still expensive. So that's my best advice. So my advice for owners or entrepreneurs or CEOs is look at the cash that you have available and see how are there ways that you can free up cash and see what you're doing with that cash. So if there are ways that you can work with suppliers or vendors to source better terms in how you pay them, if there's ways that your sales team are negotiating deals that get you cash in the door faster so you have more cash on hand so you can continue to fund your business, I think that those are two things that I would recommend that you look at. And then what Scott mentioned earlier around, really not being myopic in terms of what uncertainty could lead to. And really, again, what Len said is understanding your purpose, right? If there is an investment that you think could, moonshot your business into the next level, trying to put aside your own cognitive biases on what that money means, right? Because that money could mean tuition for 1 year's tuition for my kid, or a vacation that I promised someone, or the addition on the house that we've been putting off. And so really thinking about how do you dissociate the emotional side of the money to see what makes the most sense for your business if your intent is to continue to grow that business.
Interesting. And I would say, if you go to your wealth advisor, the wealth in this country is buy low, sell high. So while I completely agree with Shai, you've got to preserve your capital. It'll be more expensive to borrow money. You'll be more diluted by raising equity in a down market. The flip side is there are opportunities for acquisition. You can't make bad acquisitions because they'll destroy a company, but there will be companies that don't do well that have value that you can buy at substantially less than their real value in a normal economy. And I think I've seen a lot of clients do that successfully in distressed times, and some of them do it catastrophically bad. But it's something you should think about. If there are opportunities to buy things at a cheap price and integrate them, that's another way to give a kick to your organic growth as well. But don't make bad acquisitions. So it's a little conflicting, my advice, but I've seen so many companies in dark times say, I've got capital on my balance sheet, I can buy things now that would take me 3 or 4 years to create, and it would cost me more to create than to buy them.
I want to thank the panel for a great discussion today, as well as the audience. Let's give them a hand, please. I don't know about you, but I was totally inspired by the discussion today. And if you are an executive and you're looking to grow your business and you want to get started, we, Byond, have 3 slots that are available for consultation. And I invite you to either contact Hector, myself, or go to this link. And make an appointment with us.
Great.
And at this point, I will turn the meeting back over to Scott.
Yeah, I've got nothing to say other than the bar is open. So I beg of you, my staff has got too much booze at their fingertips. Please help us to plenish the resource by going, and there'll be food right out here as well. And those that feel really hardy, the palm is downstairs for later. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.